Okay. Oh, well, Shabbat Shalom, y'all. It's a gorgeous day out there, but we need some rain, right? Like, I feel like, yeah. Oh, I need a candle lighter. Boo. Jen Carolyn, wait, what happened to our candles? Well, I can't find them. Sure. Hopefully I find them. We did it.
Somebody must have just tidied things up.
Guess so. All right, so we're on page 120. There we go.
They don't want to stand up straight.
Oh no, this is what happens. I don't think what's beforehand. I'm
No,
allowed to do
next-
the whole
next-
thing. Where I let, yeah, I forgot this time.
Makes it much more interesting.
Yeah.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר שבת. אמן.
Amen. We're moving over to page 128. For Hine Mato. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Umanayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Umanayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Move over to Lachado D on page 138. And we're going to recite paragraphs 1, 5, and 9. When we arrive at paragraph 9, I invite you all to stand up and greet or face the entrance to greet the Shabbat bride. Lechado di likra kalai la 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lechado di likra kalai la 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad. Hishmianu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad, Ushmo echad, L'shem letiferet v'hili tila, Lechadodi likra kailai, la 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 la, Pnei Shabbat nekabela, Lechadodi likra kailai, la 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 la, Pnei Shabbat, Nekabela. Hitori and Hitori, Kiva Ore Kumi Ori, Uri, Ashir Daberi, Kevod Adonai Alaik Nigila, Lechadodi Likra Kailai, Lalalai, 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 Pnei Shabbat, Nekabela, Lechadodi Likra Kailai, Lalalai, 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 Pnei Shabbat, Nekabela. Please rise. Boi v'shalom, ateret b'hala, gam b'shmicha u'b'tzola, torch emunei am segula, boi chala, lecha dodi likra kailai, lalalai, 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 pnei Shabbat, nekabela. Lecha dodi likra kailai, lalalai, 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 pnei Shabbat, nekabela. You may be seated. We move on now to Shalom Aleichem on page 142. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boechem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzechem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We move over to page 144. Yitkeda v'yitkeda shemei rabba, be'alma divra cherotev yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chayerecho beit Yisrael, bagala, bagala, uv'izman kariv, v'imaru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach, le'alam ulam me'almaya, yitbarach, yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitbromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitale, v'yitala, shemei kudusha barichu, le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tusbechata v'nechemata, damiram be'alma, v'imaru, amen. We now move to the Barracuda in 146, and when you arrive there, I invite you to stand with me. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Barchu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai le'olam ha'ed. Hamevorach, Hamevorach, le'olam ha'ed. You may be seated. We're now going to continue with the English on top of page 149. I encourage you to read it with me. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way in which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim. We now continue on the page 151, and I encourage you to read the English with me on the bottom paragraph of that page. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love, this holiest of your works, and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. We now move to Shema on 152. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malachuto, Le'olam va'ed. 154. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meyodecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'elem asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinartam levarnecha b'divarta ba'am v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvetecha havaderech ushofbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leyot al yadecha v'hayula totafot beineinecha uktavtam al mizuzo beitecha uvisharecha lema'an tizkeru v'atzitem et chol mitzvotai v'tem kiroshim leloechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeti etchem meretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. Move to page 158. Lie, 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 lie. Mi chamocha ba'alim Adonai, mi kamocha ne'edar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot oseh hefele, nora tehilot oseh hefele, lai 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 lie, 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 lie. We move to the Shamru on page 162. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. Lasot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. B'nei Uvein, b'nei Yisrael, b'nei Yisrael, oti leolam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. Lasot et HaShabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki shechet yamim asa Adonai, asa Adonai, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et hashabbat. Lasot et hashabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et hashabbat. Lasot et hashabbat ledorotam berit olam. We now move to the Amidah on page 164. When you arrive there, I invite you to stand with me. Adonai sefatai tita uviyagita ilachem. Adonai sefatai tita uviyagita ilachem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Ha'gibor Ha'norah El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'konei HaKol V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot V'mevi Geula Livnei B'neihem V'man Shemo V'yahava Melech Ozer V'mashiach V'magen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Abraham Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei HaKol HaTorah Yoshia Mori HaTal Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayei HaKol B'Rachamim Somech Nochim B'Rovei Chorim U'Matir Rasurim U'Mekayem B'Matov Lishanei Afar Michamot Chaval Kibura U'Midom Elah Ve'alech Megiv U'Mechayeh U'Matmir Yeshua V'ne'eman Atah L'chayot HaKol Baruch Atah Adonai V'Mechayeh HaKol. We're now going to continue silently until page 180. You may be seated whenever you like. 1A. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'yakol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'yakol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael. Okay, now some words of Torah. So we're in the last two chapters of Leviticus this week for our Torah portion. The relief for me, Leviticus is a famously hard book to write sermons about. But we're getting so close to the finish line, but right in the very last chapter, we have this really unfortunate sexist passage that I'll tell you about that in a few moments. So we almost got there to the end, but this passage happened, and I don't like to ignore these kind of things. I like to actually embrace them, if you will. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what oath and vow formulas are. Much like contracts in modern times, the Israelites needed a way to hold Israelites accountable to agreements that they make. All contracts back then were verbal, which tends to lead to some sticky situations if one party does not fulfill the end of their verbal agreement. And as I mentioned before, I often think of the Torah as a document instructing the Israelites on how to build a civilization. A civilization needs a way to hold people accountable to their agreements. This could actually be considered a backbone of a civilization. If a society can't compel its members to do what they say they will do, then that's not much of a society at all. So we see references to oath-keeping and vow-making throughout the Torah. For example, Numbers 30, God says, if a man makes a vow to Adonai or takes an oath imposing an obligation on himself, he shall not break his pledge. He must carry out all that has crossed his lips. So God is essentially explaining that God is the notary of verbal contracts. Once it comes out of your lips, God hears it and expects you to honor it. And we see this taken very seriously in our Bible. Most famously in the book of Judges, where the charismatic leader Yiftach makes this vow in Judges 8. And he says, Adonai, if you deliver the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me on my safe return from the Ammonites shall be Adonai's and shall be offered by me as a burnt offering. Now, many scholars believe he was talking about his dog, but tragically, his daughter comes out first, and he and his daughter feel so committed to this vow that they go through with it. And this seems to be one of the many problems with these oaths. They're entirely men-oriented, where women seem to hold very little power or even capacity to make their own vows. For example, in that same Numbers passage I quoted moments earlier, it continues, and it says, if a woman makes a vow to Adonai or assumes an obligation while still in her father's household, that if her father restrains her on the day he finds out, none of her vows or self-imposed obligations shall stand. So a father has the right to annul an oath made by his daughter. There is no mention of a son being offered the same latitude. So whether the priests who wrote the book of Leviticus knew about all of this is that I just said before, it's anyone's guess. Because the priests really were interested in something like that, but something very different. They wanted to monetize oath formulas. Leviticus 27 starts out like this. When anyone explicitly vows to Adonai the equivalent for a human being, the following price structure shall apply. So this starts out kind of weird. We were just talking about keeping an oath like a contract, but the priests are mentioning something about equivalent for a human being, which reminds me of a ritual called Pidyon Haben, redeeming the firstborn. In this ancient Jewish ritual, parents would pay priests not to have their firstborn work at the temple. They would redeem their first child. It's still actually a ritual today. But instead of giving money to the temple, they give money to charity. But I don't think the Israelites are going to the temple and handing money to redeem themselves. That doesn't make a ton of sense. I think this has to do with how the priests monetize these oaths. They don't monetize the oath itself, but the demographic of the person who makes the oath. The priests are very specific about the costs of each demographic through a list. And here is the list as follows. A male from 20 to 60 years old, 50 shekels. A female from 20 to 60 years old, 30 shekels. A male from 5 to 20 years old, 20 shekels. A female from 5 to 20 years old, 10 shekels. And a male 1 month to 5-year-old, 5 shekels. A female 1 month to 5-year-old, 3 shekels. No idea how they're giving oaths. I don't get that one. And then a male over 60 years old, 15 shekels. A female over 60 years old, 10 shekels. So let's some positive takeaways here. First, it would seem that females are definitely allowed to make vows, which is great. And they get to pay less to make them, which is cool, I guess. But the real question is it because they're less valued in society? And so feminist professor Carol Myers says that this may not be the case. She writes in the Torah, a Woman's Commentary, which you can purchase on our website, by the way, that this may not be about how they are valued at all. Many commentators, she writes, now understand this table relates mainly to labor potential rather than intrinsic worth. The highest monetary value appears for persons of age 20 to 60. Perhaps because of average differences in physical strength, women or girls were deemed to have a lower productive capacity than males the same age. And thus Leviticus 27 assigns them a somewhat lower valuations in all categories. I find this possibility like a bit of a relief. Maybe the priests were not dictating worth, but accommodating income potential. They felt that women could not be able to earn as much as men, but still they wanted them to be able to afford making vows to Adonai. This may not be a sexist as much as the reality of division of labor during that time, but I still don't like it. Because children, no matter their gender, I would imagine offer the same economic worth. But it's a better explanation than anything else out there that I've seen. And the priests are actually doing something kind of clever here. By monetizing the vows, they themselves are becoming the notaries and essentially function as witnesses to these vows. While making money for the priesthood, they're also stabilizing contractual agreements for Israelite society, which improves upon the Israelite civilization. So it's not bad, I guess, in those terms for the last chapter of Leviticus. Now, this is the moment where, if I was going to give a much longer sermon, I'd bring up Kol Nidre and how we annul all vows, but I think it's for like a later sermon. I'll give that maybe when we move to Numbers 30 later in the year. But there you go. Thank you for listening. And we're going to move now on to the Misha Berach, our prayer for healing, which is on page 371. And in our own community, we're thinking about these members. Tina Mink, Chris Converse, Jennifer Eskridge, Ian Clift, David Tobias, Katie Flagel, Lindsay Raber, Micah Purdy, Cheryl Lambriani, Laura Allen, Susan Super, Melba Cook, Emmy Webb, Stephen Lamp, Russell Crass, Bill Ross, Alan Friedman, Russ Nog, Ross Rumack, Norma Haas, Ray Ellis, Judy Cantor, Carol Riven, Diane Kaplan, Craig Paulus, Philip Kaufman, Jane Anderson, Louis Mayer, Lillian Mayer, Margie Bauman, Ariel Lamp, Emily Weaver, Ginger Spiro, John Johnson, and Jackie Erdschek. If there's someone who you are thinking of who's in need of healing, please feel free to say their names out loud or in your hearts. Three, 7, 1. Misheberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We now move to the Elenu on page 587 of your prayer books. And when you arrive there, I invite you to stand with me. Elenu Shabbat La'adon HaKol La'tegidu La'ayotzer Breshit Shehu Sam Chelkin Le'ached Et Shemo V'Geralenu La'amrik Malchuto V'ananu Kolim U'mishachadim U'modim Lifnei Melech Malchei Halachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Please turn to 591. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Love each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech. May we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech ad kol ha'aretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo We now turn to the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598 of our prayer books. In our own community, we're thinking about these yard sites this week. Martha Ginden, Celia Masoro, Max Miller, David Rose, Harriet Zaman, and we're in a period of Shloshim for Bunny Levine and Mary Jo Robinson. If there's someone who you are thinking of, please feel free to say their names out loud or in your hearts. Zikr Noam Livracha, may the memories be for a blessing. Yit Kedal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, V'Elma Divra Chayote v'Yamlik Malchute, V'Chayechon uV'Yamechon uV'Chayedechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uV'Zman Kari v'Imru Amen. Yehesh Mei Rabbah Mevarak le'olam alamei almaya, Yitbarak v'Yishtabak v'Yitpa'ar v'Yibramam v'Yitnaseh. V'Yitadar v'Yitale v'Yitalal Shemei Kudusha Barichu Le'elamin Kol Birchata v'Shirata Tushbechata v'Nechamata Da'amiram be'alma v'Imru Amen. Yehesh Lama Rabba min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleni v'Yakol Yisrael v'Imru Amen. Osei Shalom b'Imromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleni v'Yakol Yisrael v'Imru Amen. Is the one who creates harmony on high, bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. You may be seated. Okay, announcements. So tomorrow we've got tech study at 10:30, and then on our Zoom room, and then we got morning minion at 8 on our Zoom room as well. And then we have Nora's bat mitzvah coming up right around the corner. I think it's on June 10th and 11th. Is that right? In 2 weeks. Great. So in 2 weeks, Nora has her bat mitzvah. We're all very excited for it. So, okay. Am I missing any other announcements? Adina also has a bat mitzvah in the near future, and that's on July 23rd and 24th. 22nd, 23rd. I should get these right at one point. I feel like I'm going to be there for them and shouldn't have the right day. Yeah. So July 22nd, 23rd. Oh, that's exciting too. All right. Any other announcements that I'm missing? Well, okay. We're in summer mode, I guess. All right. Closing melody. I'm going to sing Ozi V'Zimrat Yah. I'm not sure what page is on though. So if anyone finds it, you shout it out. I'll look for it too. Ozi V'Zimrat Yah. What was that? I don't know. We got visual learners here. Oh yes, extra rabbit points for Daniel Cliff for finding it. Cool points. Yeah, you can redeem them for cool points. That's about all they're good for, I feel like. But yes, okay. Bottom of 647. Here we go. Ozi V'Zimrat Yah Vayahi Eli Lishua. 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 Shabbat shalom, y'all.